Welcome, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening from wherever you are, and if you're watching this in the recording. But my name is Jeff Tokar, and I will be sort of the master of ceremonies for today's webinar. And once again, thank you for joining our session on bridging our siloed tools and helping you manage the surging volume of tickets you might have in your IT service management system. And as I said, I'm the master of ceremonies. My name is Jeff Tokar. I am based in the frozen tundra of Western Canada, and I am the IT service assurance practice manager across our worldwide teams. And so joining me today will be Mike Crabtree, who's an expert in IT operations management and IT service management, and he'll be taking us through the content today. So once again, thanks for joining, and here's Mike.
Okay, thank you very much, Jeff. Okay, hopefully everyone is seeing my slides and I'll kind of get started. So maybe it's a strange title that I've put, the service management is not an island, but hopefully as we go through this presentation, you'll understand what I'm trying to get to and what you can actually get out of it. So again, my name is Mike Crabtree. I'm likewise based in Canada, just north of Toronto. And I am an IT operations management solution consultant. So as Jeff was saying, really focused on service management particularly and CMDB, but I do look at the whole tool set and how they fit together. So why Mike Crabtree? What have I got to say about this? So I just a bit of background. I started out, got a degree in University of Hertfordshire in the UK, and started programming in COBOL with C and assembler thrown in just for good measure. But then over time, I actually got in an opportunity to start out with IBM, and I was doing Tivoli work. So in depth, actually working in the field on customer sites, implementing Tivoli. So I've been around the whole Tivoli tech and TME set of products. As if people are Tivoli, they'll understand those terms. And then I got an opportunity to move into Sun Microsystems, and I got the role of actually looking at all of the monitoring and management that customers needed around Sun technologies, but also the applications and the services that were running on top of those Sun machines. So we started to work with tools like BMC, Micromuse, Netcool, and various different tools that customers needed to be able to use to integrate in those Sun platforms into their systems. So that gave me a lot of really good background and seeing how customers implement their different systems. Over time, I got an opportunity to move across to Canada. So I'm now in Toronto, as I say, and I cover both Canada and the East Coast of US as the IT operations management tools consultant, really primarily trying to help customers to determine where should they go with their service management, looking at their current infrastructure and what they've got, and how do we mold everything together to get them a proper solution. So let's kind of jump into an agenda. Hopefully that's given you a background as to where I've come from. So why this topic? I'm going to go through and explain why I think this is an important area to cover. Let's cover the who really benefits from this concept called service management. Well, what is service management? What is it? It means a lot of things to a lot of people. I'm also going to talk about ITIL and going back to even version 1 of ITIL and the benefits and how it's supposed to all fit together, and then talk about a concept of a practical implementation that we use at Micro Focus and is available for anyone else to actually use in implementing both service, event, problem, change, asset, all those things that really need to make up a complete operational management system. So why this particular topic? Why have I chosen this to talk about today? So during those times when I was part of IBM and Sun Microsystems, I got trained on ITIL, as I say, version 1 back in the UK, when it was actually driven by the UK government. And I got the opportunity to actually go and speak to many enterprise customers, both financial, manufacturing, healthcare, all sorts of different organizations, and try and assess how well they were doing with their ITIL implementations. And what I learned from that is that a lot of companies were struggling with what to do with ITIL. To me, it's a set of really good best practices or common sense kind of written down in a set of books where every component is joined together. But many customers were really struggling with that concept of trying to bring everything together under an ITIL platform. What I was seeing was lots of broken processes and workflows, things that didn't join together properly or missing components of ITIL. I've spoken to customers even recently who take event management and they send all of their events through and they become incidents. So they haven't really followed a proper workflow of how you actually move stuff through. That in turn has created lots of silos. So you also see this is the service management group, and what are they doing? Or the event management group, or the network event management group. There's lots of silos of people, and because there's broken process and workflows, that feed of information doesn't always happen the way that it really should do according to ITIL. What that also then causes is people to start buying extra tools, and you end up with a tools overload. They buy more things than they really need to try and fix the issue, when in reality, a lot of it is getting back to the core of what ITIL is about and trying to implement it as it was really intended. And a lot of that comes down to a lack of ITIL training. So one of the best places that I ever saw ITIL implemented was actually Guinness in Ireland. And what they did from an ITIL perspective was that they actually trained the senior management people, including the CEO at the time, about ITIL, just the basic understanding of what ITIL was about. That meant that I could drive ITIL down into the organization, and everyone started to understand the benefits of ITIL. Why do we do incident management? Why do we do event management? Those kind of things, and how they glue together. That was the best. Unfortunately, in most organizations, the people that are ITIL trained are the practitioners down at the sort of field or operational levels, and they're trying to push these ideas up the chain, and it can be quite difficult to do. So if you can turn that around and get some more senior management people trained in ITIL, even just the foundation, it will really help organizations through. So why do we even talk about service management? Okay, and who benefits from it? So you'll often see with Micro Focus presentations, particularly around IT operations management, this concept of this diamond. And the way that I view this is everything that we do inside your IT systems. This is information technology providing services to business users, to end users.
Things really consider. MFA is not bulletproof. That's the point here.
Can we someone just to mute the system, please? Thank you. So yes, we talk about IT and how it delivers those operational business insights. So how do we request things from IT? How do we provide information and status updates on how well IT is delivering to the business? That really all needs to come through your service management tool. That becomes the interface in and out of the different systems. But we also need to work with the R&D team. So the arrow on the left is all about taking what the business needs in terms of new applications and how do we get those delivered from an R&D cycle into a production system that's actually monitored and managed properly. And whilst we're doing that and growing and moving things around, we need to be very careful about that security and the governance that goes around those systems. We can't just allow R&D to create VMs and just throw them into a production. We have to put those security measures around it and the compliance conversations. So it's a very big, complex area. It's really all about the services that IT is providing to their end users. And we've got different views on what we need to do. So from an IT point of view, we would prefer systems that say stable. They don't change. We have that stability and control around everything that goes on. That means we can apply that governance to everything we're doing. Stable is good. And certainly when I was in looking at the banks, for instance, in the UK doing those ITIL assessments, they wouldn't change anything for 12 months. In fact, the only things that typically went in were security patches, high-level security patches. So they absolutely wanted stability. But on the other side of the coin, particularly these days, the business wants that agility. They want to be able to change with the market and create new applications, move in different ways. But they also want to be kept informed wherever they are. So keeping the status of current systems and being able to do approvals online very quickly in a very fast-paced environment, particularly as we moved into the virtualization phase and then now into the cloud virtualization. This becomes even more critical that we really have those controls and stability, but we are agile at the same time and keep the business users up to date. So that's really who's looking at the service management aspect of everything that IT is doing. So what is service management? What is it that we're really trying to do here? So I look at service management as being that discipline, and it's a discipline across everything that you do inside IT. You'll see later on, I'll show a diamond again that has the word service in every part of what we actually provide as tools from Micro Focus. It's not just a specific area that where service manager does one bit and then the event monitoring team is separate. They actually have to work together very closely. Indeed, things like asset management and discovery are all key parts of that. So let's look at what is it that IT does. So IT provides these services to the business, and we become that link into everything that maybe sales or marketing or product development and HR, facilities management, maybe that they're all needing to integrate into that IT system. And we do that typically through portals. So within our SMAX product, for instance, we offer a portal so that people can actually come in and see how well their tickets are actually following. And we actually give people the ability to see and track what's happening to their tickets. For the actual administrators of the system, it's making sure they've got visual dashboards that they can very quickly see how well the systems are actually operating and how well they're fitting with service level agreements, for instance, or operational level agreements. And then providing help desks that actually are able to very quickly respond to requests that are coming in from end users or incident tickets. How do we help them to actually get to resolution much quicker than before? So that service management tool at the front really needs to be that aggregation point for everything to do with the business service level agreement. So we're going to take in information about events and alerts and bring them in as incidents, but behind a service model that is actually shared between the two products. That service management tool also becomes that control mechanism for everything you do inside IT. So it's very easy to say, oh, I've seen an event on a network device and I'm going to go and do something to go and fix it. I'm going to run this little command line that will fix things. But now you've lost control and the event management team are doing things and tinkering with the systems. They're not pulling that data in through incident, problem, and change to give it that formality and control over what's actually happening. And that's where these systems really need to fit together. Overall, your service management tool becomes a place where you can actually do collaboration between the network management team, the database team, the server team, and actually help them to understand the service model and how everything affects then the business user. So it really is a place where everything comes together. But this is complex to really make sure it actually happens properly. So let's step back a bit and look at ITIL from the ground up. So if you do a quick Google search on Google, you'll find lots of different diagrams trying to represent what ITIL looks like. Circular diagrams, layer diagrams, all sorts of different things. And they're probably all kind of okay in their way, but they're just different representations of what was, even back in ITIL version 1, it was designed as that integrated set of processes that everything has to work together. And even as we've added new processes into ITIL, we've now moved into more of that service focus and gone into how do we manage cloud environments, etc. The core components of things like incident, problem, change, event management, asset management are still the same kind of things and still apply in almost exactly the same ways they did before. So where does this really break down when it's implemented? What seems to go wrong when customers are actually trying to do this? And one of the key things is that lack of focus around what is the service that we're actually providing to the end users and the customers, and getting everyone as a team behind that view as to how we do that. Now, within Micro Focus, what we do around our tools that we actually provide, our software solutions, is that we've actually created this view that we call our sort of ITOM diamond. And whilst it has 4 areas around that diamond, one of the important things about the wording on this diamond is the word service. Every one of them talks about service, and it's service from IT to your end customer, whether it's an internal business unit or a true end user. What we also have is this concept of something called Optic. And Optic is really our centralized platform for pulling relevant pieces of data and analytics and things into a central repository that can then be shared around all of those other components of the service lifecycle. So whether it's service management needing to talk to a CNDB that would be under Optic, that's also used by service assurance and service governance, for example. So how do we really build this out? So service management at the top, this is the one that, as I say, it's that interface into the business users or the end users, and is where people put in their requests for new things. And it could be a request from other IT people, like requesting a new virtual machine. It could be requesting a new laptop. It could be requesting support for access to a printer. Those kind of different things that are actually coming in through there. We'll then have fulfillment. So this is really where you're looking at how you're going to take the things that are typically from, say, R&D, and actually get them provisioned into your operational environments. So this needs to be very rapid, very quick, very automated. It certainly would speed things up. And as we move into cloud, automation is the key word that is really required across this whole scenario. On the right, we have what we call service assurance. And this is Jeff's real specialist area, where we look at how do we bring in the events and the alerts from all the masses of different systems that we have out there, of which there are hundreds of thousands an hour coming into most enterprise systems. How do we take all of that data and use AI and machine learning to really get down to the critical things that we need to look at, and then be able to apply that intelligence that we've got into the service management side of the world? And finally, we have our service governance. These are the guardrails around how we do things like compliance, license audit capabilities, being able to link into your security systems to say how well are these particular patches going, can we do that compliance, and actually put things back as they should be if they get out of sync with a standard. So what are we doing around those 4 key areas? So we're trying to reduce the amount of time that it actually gets to resolution, for instance, in service management. So when a request comes in, something's maybe not working, people are trying to ask for a laptop, how can we speed up that whole process for people? With service fulfillment, how can we change the manual process of actually implementing a piece of software? And I've seen, unfortunately, even at banks, I've seen people literally throw a bunch of files across the wall at an operational team and say, here are the files, go and run this. That is very difficult, the governance around that is just gone completely. And so whilst it's fast, it's losing a lot of the detail around how do you manage a system properly. And when I used to do Tivoli, we used to do Tivoli software distribution. And we used to say, even if you are deploying one single file to a system, you should actually automate it. The benefit of the automation through service fulfillment is that you can then repeat it multiple times. You can actually test that deployment through your dev test QA before you go to production. And you'll hopefully also build in the back out procedures for when it doesn't work. So service fulfillment and automation is a key component of actually making all these things fit together. The service governance, as I said, just the ability to look out for things like log4j instances where you're looking for specific versions, understanding where exactly that's been deployed. This is really where you can actually strengthen everything that you're doing around the security of your systems, the compliance and the audit capabilities of things. And then finally, that service assurance, as I said, just the number of events that come through are, in most organizations, vast numbers, and you have to be able to take that and get that event reduction ready to go out of the box, and then use machine learning to actually improve on how that's actually going through, and get down to what are the critical events and alerts that I have to do something about based on the business requirements, the service level, based on service management. What is it I need to focus on to actually keep the business running? So back to our kind of core diamond shape, we've got these 4 key areas. How does Micro Focus then apply our technologies around that? And you'll see now that we've actually got this image now where we add in change management, incident management, asset management, provisioning, patching and compliance, auto remediation, consolidation of events and performance monitoring. They're sort of the surrounding bits and pieces that you actually need to look at. And we recognize that some customers have already got some of these components in place and they trust the data that's in them. We can actually mix and match the various components that you need to actually create a complete solution. But based on what I've been saying about how everything really has to fit together very neatly and follow those flows of data that actually need to move through. Again, that core component called Optic right in the middle, this is really where you have things like CMDB. And the CMDB, the configuration management database, has to be something that's shared between all of these other components around the edge that we're talking about here. Having things like a data lake so that you can actually analyze the events and the performance data and start to make decisions about correlation of performance over a period of time and see whether there's anomalies that are actually being seen in the system. This is really where sharing that data between all of these services is really critical. So I mentioned earlier on that one of the issues with working in ITIL is that it has all of these connections between components, and then you're trying to apply these software tools on top. But how do you do that when maybe you've got a mixture of different vendors that are actually coming into this and different skill levels and knowledge levels within an organization? I'm just going to take a quick sip of water. Okay, so how do we do that practical implementation of ITIL? And the way that we talk about this inside Micro Focus is through an organization called the Open Group, and one of their designated areas is called IT for IT. This is a group that is primarily led by Micro Focus, but also has many of the major vendors for operations management tools working in there, as well as many customers that have actually been part of these standards that they're pulling together. And what we're looking at is how do you actually build a system that can actually follow proper workflows that fit all of these components together, right from how do you actually plan and build and test actual applications, how do you actually then deliver them into an operational system, and then actually go through what we call run or detect to correct. So typically, as I say, you would come in through something like a service portal and maybe make requests of the system. And those requests could be new ideas that you've got. They could be requests for a new laptop or a new app that's going to come in. And that's really fed into service management. So service management, as I say, is really the interface in and out of what's happening inside IT. We can then bring in the service fulfillment. So subscriptions allow people to request access to certain things through fulfillment. We talk about service assurance. So you'll recognize that these are all similar words that we have in our ITOM diamond from Micro Focus. And then that service governance and compliance. So they're using exactly the same terminology. We've just put it into a diamond. This is how IT for IT views how these components actually fit together. And likewise, on the application development side, which we've got tools for in Micro Focus, it's just not mine or Jeff's specific area, but around things like portfolio and planning, development lifecycle, quality testing, release management. How do you actually take what's happening in the application development side and then feed information through? But so whilst we've got these blocks here, we need to actually link them together. And the way that we do that is through what we call value streams. So two value streams here that are shown are things like service onboarding. How do we bring a service that's been created by our R&D teams or a third party that we bought in? How do we actually bring that into the system? How do we then, through service management, allow people to then subscribe to that particular service or request it? And then people are going to then consume that particular service, and we're then going to actually go through and monitor that through service assurance. Other ones you might see is things like continuous deployment, particularly as you're in the agile environment. So applications have turned out, I've worked with a marketing company, and they were turning out new code every half an hour for different customers that required particular tweaks and things based on those customers' need for marketing changes that needed to be very rapid. So that continuous deployment has to be there, and we've got to make sure the tools can handle that kind of very rapid change in systems. We need the operational compliance. So when we see that things are out of alignment, maybe the relevant patches aren't actually set up properly, or we've seen network changes that weren't actually done through a change management process, how do we then monitor for those kind of things? How do we then remediate those issues that have come through? So that's the operational compliance side. Continuous operations. This is really now starting to look at those events and the performance data and learning through a period of time using AI and machine learning to say what's actually good events, what are bad events, what should we be creating alerts for, and how does it fit in with the service that we're actually providing. And that service model becomes critical for everything that we're doing in this part of this to make sure that we're focused on what the business need is. And then a component that actually needs to feed back right back into R&D. So when we're doing event and performance monitoring, how do we make sure that that's actually fed back through incident problem change, through the service management cycle, and back into the application development? And then finally, a couple just across here on the left-hand side, that's the continuous integration and the continuous planning, the cycles that are happening within the application development. And then we'll trigger off again things like service onboarding, service consumption, and so forth. So these are kind of the very high-level value streams. And if you look at the Open Group website, you can get access to all of this kind of detail. We have people within our professional services that are experts at actually helping people to deploy against this IT for IT value stream view of the world, and pull all of these products together. And the reason we can do that is that behind all of this, we actually have a lot of detail. So there is detail. I talked about things like the service onboarding, but now you can start to see that's linked to things like a service catalog, that someone through a service portal could then go and request access to a particular service that you're running. We have things like backup and recovery on the right-hand side for doing things like audit reporting, etc. So it starts to become a lot more detail behind every part of this system, including who is it that actually needs to approve something? Who is it that needs to request it in the first place? Who's actually going to deploy that kind of thing? So there's a lot of detail about the users that actually do this kind of work and the kind of data flows that have to go backwards and forwards. So there's a vast amount of work that's gone into this. They've recently just released IT for IT version 3. I believe it's just going through final ratification of some of the documents and how they might start to do training around that work. So it was actually formally released back in Scotland, I believe, about a month ago. So now we're just waiting for the training systems to come through. Again, a lot of detail in this. This is worth looking into if you are trying to do any kind of operations management architecture of pulling service assurance, service management, service fulfillment, and service assurance together in one play. So I would strongly suggest that people do take a look at this IT for IT and what they call the digital value network. All of the information is free and open to use, but it's worth also signing up for IT for IT. One of the benefits that we have as a company is our own Chief Technology Officer, Lars Rossen, is also one of the leading people within Open Group overall, but we drive a lot of what's actually happening inside IT for IT. So we have lots of input, but it's also run by customers and by other vendors as well. So it's not just a Micro Focus thing, but we are using this as our primary sort of platform for how we even develop tools going forward. So that's kind of all I was going to go through today. So I am open to any questions that people have about maybe what I've seen in the past at other organizations, and what I've seen actually has helped people to get this to work. So thank you very much, but just as I say, open to any questions and answers. Jeff, I wonder if you're seeing anything in the chats or anything like that. Or... Yeah, we're on mute.
There we go.
Yeah.
No, actually, haven't seen any questions in the chat posted in there. So again, welcome to post questions in there to anybody out there who wants to have Mike step in and answer any of those questions through that. Or I think at this point, Mike, we can probably invite folks to come off mute if they wanted to ask a question live verbally as well.
Absolutely. Maybe I can turn it round to some extent and see if people have got comments about how well they've actually also been doing with implementing ITIL and tool sets. I see a few of you have come off mute. If you've got questions, please go ahead. No? Got a quiet bunch.
So Mike, actually, I'll sort of press you on a little bit here around the service side of things. Obviously, you mentioned in ITIL services are a big part of that, right? And so can you maybe help us sort of understand a little bit better what is meant by a service, how you define that, and maybe also how it sort of reflects in the tools?
Okay, that's a good question. So because we're trying to share lots of data between, for instance, the CMDB and our service management tool, and that service management tool could be our own SMAX product, which is an excellent product, but it could be one of the other vendors that's out there. So we have to make sure that there's a level set of terminology that we use. So we've got a 7-layer view of what a service looks like. And that starts off with things like, what is the service design? How do we define what the service is going to be, what the SLAs are going to be, who's allowed to access it, those kind of things. So very much business focused details about the service. And then as it starts to step down through the layers, you end up with business services and infrastructure services. So any typical service that goes out to an end user will rely on several different infrastructure services, maybe databases and backup restore or virtualization technologies. As you drill further down, you're then starting to get into things that we can actually discover using universal discovery kind of technologies. That's when you start to get into the actual applications that are running there, the running software, the inventory, the hard disks, the storage systems, the actual servers, and cloud environments, if it happens to be that. So we can actually look at all of those different layers, and we do have a standard for how we actually look at those, as I say, that we can then share around to other systems. But it has to start with that service definition. And certainly from a service management point of view and inside our tool, we can actually start right at that level of what is the service we're actually creating, who's got access to it, how are people going to request access to it, and do support level things, etc. on there, and how we're going to handle tickets, who are the support group that's going to support that service. So there's a lot of things involved in just defining what the service is going to be. That's
good. Thanks. Yeah. Any other questions out there? I still haven't seen anything pop into the chat. So I guess the other question that kind of comes up, and maybe it's teeing it up more for myself than for you, Mike, but in terms of reducing, you talk about the siloed tools and the number of tickets that can be generated, especially when you start to stream some of those events directly into incidents. So, in your experience, how have you seen customers be successful in sort of reducing the number of incidents and working across these silos to sort of get you to a better place in terms of managing those incidents instead of just dealing with a sheer volume of incidents in your service management system?
So the kind of things that we have in OpsBridge are exactly what we need. It's things like the deduplication of events that come through is just the very basic starter. Being able to analyze and say, if you apply the service model on top of what we're getting in those events and say, okay, I've got a network device that appears to be not working properly, but I've also got 24 servers that are not responding. Mm-hmm. Is it the 24 servers that have actually got problems, or is it the one network device? Right. In a very simplistic view of the world, yeah. But it's that kind of ability to be able to link things together as a service model and say these things are related in a particular way and dependent on each other. Mm-hmm. We do that through our discovery tools, and we share that through to OpsBridge. We share that through to service management tools. That service model is key for everything that we're actually doing there. But then the other thing, I think I mentioned it several times, was about automation. So the more you can automate this kind of thing around event management, turning and picking out what are the critical events you need to look at and do something with that are actionable, then we can actually say, okay, what then within the service model says that this is the important one I really need to focus on. I often give an example of two queues of events that are coming in. One of the queues has got 10 events in it. One queue has only got 2 events in it. So you would tend to think, well, if I, from a business perspective, if I clear the queue that's got 10 events in it, or in this case, they're transactions, so I should say transactions. So 10 transactions in one queue, two transactions in the other. From a business point of view, you tend to think if I can get a fix for the 10 transactions, that allows a lot more business to run through the system. What we also need to look at, though, is what is the value of each of those transactions to the business? And if I say that each of those transactions that's 10 were $10 each, then I've got $100 worth of transactions I could let through. If I say that the queue that's got 2 transactions in it is worth $1 million for each transaction, I've now put a completely different perspective on a $100 queue or a $2 million queue. So being able to pull in business details as well really helps you to focus on what do I fix in terms of all these events actually coming through.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense for sure.
And sorry, the other thing that I really like about what you've been doing with the OpsBridge tool is the AI ops capability, and this ability to pick out the difference between having high CPU and a specific level that you might say that's going to trigger an alert, mm-hmm. as opposed to saying, if I look at CPU and say bandwidth and the transactions that are going through, the business transactions, typically during the month, they may well all be going up and down at the same time. And that's probably good, which means you don't have to set a specific level as long as the transactions are going through. There's no problem having high CPU. The issue is when you have high CPU, but there's no transactions going through and no bandwidth you've been used, you say, there's something wrong. and that's a critical thing that I've seen OpsBridge do that picks out those anomalies right. that most other tools just wouldn't pick out. That is a critical thing. But you couldn't do that without AI and machine learning to get right. through that amount of data.
Right, right. And I think it's key there, the data, right? Because one of the things that we talk about is really consolidating all that data, right? It's really, you have these tools in silos. You may have a network management tool that may or may not be Micro Focus. You may have some tool monitoring your cloud environments or your virtualization environments. Those tools all kind of live in a silo, right? And what you're talking about, that machine learning, that AI, the deduplication, mapping those things to a business service, that's really where you need to start to take all those siloed tools and bring it together, right? And that's where I think
Absolutely.
Operations Bridge can do that. And as you said, sort of model those, map those over top of those service models that we're sharing on the service management side. So now, like you said, the network goes down. Well, that might be monitored in a different place than the 10 servers, right? And so consolidating that data, understanding that when the network goes down and those 10 servers go down, those are actually related. And the root cause is the network problem. That's the one you want to generate the incident on, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. It's getting to that root cause, but you've got to use the tools to help you to get there. Just the volume of events that we look at these days. I did a project for British Telecom in the UK a long time ago, and they were talking about hundreds of thousands of events per hour that were coming through. And it had to be a system that could handle that and do that deduplication and stuff like that. But as you say, now that we've got into AI ops capabilities now, that makes it a fantastic difference. But the volume of data is phenomenal.
Right. And with Operations Bridge as well, on top of those AI ops capabilities is also the automated event correlation, right? So now we can take those, again, disparate sources of events, like you said, huge volumes of events. When your event browser is just scrolling by, you might miss that a bunch of these things are related together, right? And so again, using machine learning, it's a good thing to be able to then automatically correlate those events. We've had for years and years the ability to do that prescriptively, right? Writing rules and things like that, but that can be an administrative overhead. So again, leveraging those machine learning technologies, taking all those events in, understanding that they're grouped and related together, they've occurred together in the past. And that that's probably where you want to start looking for issues rather than just trying to pick out the ones from the scrolling browser. When they're all grouped together, you can say, okay, these are related. Now I've only got 10 events instead of 1,000 or 2,000 events.
Absolutely.
So again, leveraging that machine learning.
Absolutely.
So. Awesome. Well, I still haven't seen any questions come into the chat. We've been having a bit of a conversation here on our own, so we'll pause and see if anybody else wants to come off mute and ask any questions. Still not seeing anything out there. Well, we don't need to necessarily drag it out here, Mike, unless you have any last comments or anything you wanted to add. Might be a good place.
I think the key thing is, both you and I, both available to chat to customers and talk through these kind of things that we've talked about around things like closed loop incident processes and SACM, various different things that are not necessarily product specific, but how these things all hang together and make a complete operational management suite. So happy to open up those discussions with anyone.
Yeah, definitely reach out, and we'll happy to follow up. Maybe there'll be some questions that pop into your head after the session's over or whatever. And as Mike said, we're happy to connect and go through those questions. Or if you have situations and things you want to try to help to understand how we can address those things with Micro Focus, we're happy to continue this conversation. So thanks, Mike. Great topic, great conversation.
Yeah, thank you.
I think at this point we can probably wrap it up.
Okay. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.